This is Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher is here. The guys have a new podcast out with the thoughts on Super Bowl 57. You can check out that, and they'll have a new offseason lineup and schedule for you. We'll talk to Geoff about that in just a second. We'll, of course, see what's next for this Eagles team and get Geoff's thoughts on the two coordinators moving on and get his thoughts on who could be replacing them. There's so much going on, 20 free agents, a lot of storylines. This offseason is going to be a doozy, so let's bring in Geoff Mosher for another edition of Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Moshe, what's up, brother?
Michael, great to be with you on the Sports Bash at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. How are you?
It's always good, man. Football at 4, tried and true. You're the only one to ever miss a segment. Did you know that?
Listen, every great record has to be broken. That's, and I'm glad to be the one to break it.
Yes, the streak was snapped on Radio Row. We had no Football at 4 for one day only, but that's because we were at the Super Bowl. How did they get back? Well, they have a lot of decisions, Moshe. Let's get your thoughts on first Shane Steichen. We thought on Monday that he was going to be hired. That became official. So how big of a loss, and what are some of the options? How do you see that position getting filled?
Yeah, I think it's a big loss anytime you're a really good team and you lose two guys in Steichen and Gannon who were there for the start of it all. They went through the trials and tribulations in year one, and then obviously we're there this year. And, I know sometimes the play calls and the product can be polarizing, especially on the Gannon side, but there's no question these guys are extraordinarily respected and liked and appreciated within the confines of the NovaCare complex. Not just like, hey, we're happy to have him. These two guys are very, very well respected. And I think you could tell, at least by Steichen's press conference in Indianapolis, that they understood and they understand that this is a players' league, and they're both really good. And this is not just from me. This is coming from people who work with them, with the Eagles, and people who observe them from the outside. They're both excellent at making the players understand that they're the ones that make this thing work. Like they make the players understand that they are appreciated and it's all about them. They do a great job of that. And so you're going to lose two guys who are a big part of this great season that the Eagles had. Now, fortunately for them, they've got some really good in-house candidates. In fact, I was speaking with someone today who just noted how this is what Howie does. Howie had Vic Fangio hanging around just in case, he might need a defensive coordinator, and Vic wound up going to Miami. But because actually the Gannon thing sort of blindsided all of them. Gannon didn't even have an interview with the Cardinals, to our knowledge, before the playoffs started. But to that point, you've got Denard Wilson on defense. He's a veteran guy. He's been around. He's very well respected. He knows the team's personnel. He's been here for a couple of years with Sirianni. And then on the offensive side, Brian Johnson is a guy who oversees the quarterback as quarterback's coach. You've seen great development out of the quarterback. The question, he's a natural in-house candidate. The question is, will Nick Sirianni feel comfortable with him calling plays, because he has not been the play caller at the NFL level? I believe he was in Florida and in other stops. But the question will be then, does he feel comfortable handing him play calling duties, or does Nick Sirianni become the play caller next year until he may feel comfortable passing off?
Yeah. I don't know if it was with you on Monday, but we kind of talked about, does Sirianni like Kevin Petula, and then you've got Ken Petula, and you've got Hurts maybe lobbying for Johnson, and then, is that the first kind of fork in the road of Sirianni maybe not getting – this is what happened to Doug, right? He didn't get his way, and he ended up leaving. Is that a possibility that, hey, Sirianni might want one guy and Hurts might usurp him and say, no, I'd rather him?
Yeah, I don't know that would be an issue. I think, usually sometimes these promotions are not just dictated by what a person has done, but the fear of losing that person to another organization. We know the Panthers were looking at Brian Johnson. I heard a couple of other teams also that had openings this year were looking at him, maybe not for head coaching job, but just sort of coordinator or coach job. So, that makes Brian Johnson a commodity. And if you're, intent on keeping your best coaches, then you've got to promote them and give them the responsibilities. So, so does that mean if you promote Brian Johnson, that Kevin Patullo might be a guy that Gannon or Steichen look to bring in where they go? Possibly. Those are things that the Eagles have a better grasp on right now and that we're trying to find out. But I'd still sense that Brian Johnson would be their guy to fill the OC role. Now, I think you still have to do interviews now.
Yes.
I have to go check how the rules work with the Rooney Rule. I think you still have you have to conduct outside interviews regardless.
Yes, that is accurate.
So I'm sure you'll hear some names. One guy's name I heard defensively is Sean Desai. The Eagles might have some interest there, so we'll see if they bring him in for an interview. But I really do believe they'll be prone to want to stay inside in the house.
All right, Moch, let's go to defense. John Gannon, we hinted at, you said they kind of got blindsided. He stayed in Arizona and got hired by Arizona. So is there in-house candidates, or do they want to try to get, Vic Fangio? We talk about him. He's a veteran guy. Do they want to go get a more veteran play caller? You mentioned a name there. Decide, do they have a guy under the radar? Is there someone on the staff? It seems the defensive coordinator role is a much different situation because there are some definitive in-house candidates. Do they want to run the same defense? I mean, Gannon obviously was not the most popular guy. Do they want to just keep that same defense? Do they have an in-house guy? Or they want a veteran guy? Give us a read on how the defensive coordinator job will be filled.
Yeah, like I mentioned, Denard Wilson to me is the guy that we know that the Eagles really like. We know that they bring him in 2 years ago, knowing that he had experience. He was already a defensive backs coach with the Jets. They think he's a good leader. And to me, I think if you look at all the defensive position coaches, probably the guy most in line to get that promotion of defensive coordinator. You could probably make a good argument for Jeremiah Washburn, who's done a great job with the edge rushers. I don't know if they've ever looked at Washburn, though, as a play caller. I mean, he's the guy who's really been an offensive line coach for most of his career. Even though his last name was Washburn, and even though he's been coaching defensive linemen and edge rushers this past year, most of his coaching career has been offensive line coaching. And there was a year where he was also in the Eagles front office. But I've never heard his name kind of come up in future defensive coordinator conversations the way I have with Denard Wilson. So I think Denard Wilson would be the most logical choice if they stay in-house.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I mean, obviously, like Nick Sirianni has become Sean McVay all of a sudden. If you coach on this staff, they're just coming after you. But he did a good job of finding these guys. He got John Gannon. They coached together in Indianapolis. He got Shane Steichen. I don't know what the connection with those two guys were, but he went and found him. He
Chargers.
was with the Chargers, right. Sirianni had been with the Chargers, and that's where Steichen was. So he's going to have to try to replenish two key roles there. All right, so we got the coaching stuff there. Then the quarterback. Hurts says today's not the day to talk about the contract. He said that yesterday. When is that day, right, and is that the first order of business for Howie Roseman?
Maybe tomorrow, 6 a.m. Yeah, I think that's going to be an order of – look, there are some guys. There are some times where the contract takes a little bit because the market has to be set, right? Or you have to go to the combine and have conversations in back rooms and watering holes with agents and try to figure out what the market is. This should not be one of the cases. Obviously Joe Burrow is also up for an extension, and maybe they want to wait. Maybe Jalen Hurts wants to wait until Burrow gets his cash first until he does. But I get a feeling that the Eagles don't want to mess around. They're going to want to get to his agent, Nicole Lynn, pretty quickly, get him together. And I don't even think they're going to try to pull any fast ones over. They don't normally do that at the quarterback position. In fact, I wanted to go check a couple of years ago what week it was what month and what week it was that Carson Wentz got his extension, because I'm pretty sure I remember that happening relatively early in the offseason as well. So it would not surprise me if this thing were done sooner than later.
Right. Now, and I guess one question would be, a follow-up would be, all right, they did this to Wentz. Is there any part of them that gets a little cold feet and because they did this once and it didn't work out?
I don't think Howie Roseman is the risk-averse type. I mean, I think when they identify a quarterback that they like and believe can be their franchise foundation, they quickly move to make sure that that guy is wrapped up. And we can criticize the Wentz contract all we want. That's fine. It's armchairing a little bit, or you can say, I said, I thought it was a bad idea. But what they signed Carson Wentz for at the time they gave him the extension compared to what the market became like a month or two later, I think after Dak signed it or whoever, the number went up so big that I know it's hard to go back in history to remember, but his cap numbers were not nearly as exorbitant as some of the guys who then were closer to free agency and got even bigger money than Carson Wentz. It's sort of like the Bryce Harper thing. It seemed like a boatload of money for a guy, but when you realize that it would rank like 15th in the MLB at the time, you realize, hey, you know what, that's actually not as high as everybody thinks it is. And the same thing will happen with Jalen Hurts because he still has a year left on his contract. So they'll put a lot of that new money into next year, and then the contract extension technically won't start until 2024. And I guarantee you his cap numbers, the first 3 years of that deal compared to what the next, like Herbert and Burrow and whatever he says after that, will be not as damaging.
So, by the way, he has a $4.8 million cap hit next season with the current contract that he has. If you could handicap this and we could put these betting lines out there, who gets the contract first? Who makes the first move? Is it Hurts? Is it Herbert? Is it Burrow? These guys are all up for the extensions. Who gets that? Which team jumps out first and makes the move?
I would think the Eagles, because they have the best situation to be able to do it, because Jalen Hurts is only on the cap for 4.5 next year. So I would think that that's an opportunity that they have to, again, put a lot of that new money from an extension into next year, which will, of course, let's say it's $30 million of new money out of $150 million, $200 million. That's still a significant chunk. And even if that means his cap number next year is $35 million, how does that still compare to the Kyler Murrays and the Daks and whatever the guy who's a first-round pick like Burrow has to sign? Because a guy like Burrow, first-round pick, so he's already making a ton more in the last year of his deal than Jalen Hurts. So his cap number can't be as low even with an extension. You get what I'm saying? I know this is all math and it's sort of bookkeeping stuff, but the Eagles are in the driver's seat in that regard to be able to pay Jalen Hurts what his market is, which will be a lot, but also have that kind of great flexibility there because of his contract.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, a couple off-season. I mean, obviously this is all going to start. We know they have a lot of impending free agents. I want to throw some key ones your way and just get your early take and feel on their futures. Miles Sanders.
Yeah, I think we've seen the last of Miles Sanders. I think we've seen the last of Miles Sanders in an Eagles uniform. But the one thing that's going for the Eagles that might change it is that Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs.
It's a very good free agent class.
Yeah. So, I mean, how many teams really want to break the bank for our running back in free agency? It's not going to be that many. So if those guys all wind up hitting free agency and the teams that prioritize running back go scoop these guys up, there may not be that suitor for Miles Sanders that's going to pay him all that kind of money. And he may have to say, he may come back to the Eagles and say, well, I guess I now have to take a below market deal. And the Eagles might say, we don't trust you as much and we don't love you, but we know that you are good. And, now that we can get you at a discount compared to the market, let's talk.
All right. Bradbury.
He said yesterday, I think it was, that he's not coming to play for cheap. He knows his worth. That was an indication to me that he's going to want a cornerback one type salary. And that's a premier position in free agency. I mean, we all know what Byron Jones got a couple of years ago, right? When the Eagles tried to get him and weren't able to, and Miami just showered that guy with money. And Bradbury, even though he's a little older than Jones at the time, I think he's probably a little bit considered better a corner than Byron, especially a pure outside corner. So he's going to make a lot of money, and I think that's going to be too difficult for the Eagles to compete with.
One other thing to keep in mind, too, a lot of players on defense are free agents. Their coordinator just went to Arizona. You would imagine he's going to target to bring some of these guys in, and I would think Bradbury's going to say, I like the way he used me in Philadelphia. So Don't be surprised like when
and
Buddy
I'm
Ryan
sure
was.
the linebackers. Yeah, absolutely. And the linebackers, if he's going to want to get a little younger, I would think, in Arizona. And you got T.J. Edwards there, who just had a really nice year for him.
Right. So let's go over those two: Kaiser White, T.J. Edwards. I would imagine one's back, one's gone.
Yeah, I would imagine. I think there could be a case where both are gone. Because TJ might get a really big contract, and Nakobe Dean can fill that role. And then Kaiser White didn't play so great down the stretch. He was okay. He wasn't bad. He just wasn't really good. So could the Eagles probably bring him back on a 1 year again? Yeah, they probably could. Or maybe he goes somewhere else, and the Eagles just do what they do all the time, which is find another 1 year, placeholder for him.
Yeah. Let's see. How about the contingent of Fletcher, Cox, Hargrave, Joseph? I would imagine is gone. Your three defensive tackles.
I don't know that Joseph's gone. I mean, he obviously wanted to win the Super Bowl ring. They didn't. He showed he could play still. And if you're going to not have Fletcher Cox back and you're going with Jordan Davis next year, who needs a ton of development. I mean, I think we can all finally see that he played 10 snaps in the Super Bowl. I mean, come on. And they weren't 10 great snaps either. Some of them were good, but not all of them. So it's kind of a risk, right, to go into next year saying my interior tackles are Jordan Davis and fill in the blank. Draft pick, Fletcher Cox, Milton Williams. You just don't feel great there. So I think that you're going to have to assign a veteran on a 1 year deal placeholder for that spot anyway. So it might as well be Linval Joseph, I would think.
Hargrave?
Listen, normally you say the Eagles do this deal because they prioritize the trenches, but he's going to make a lot of money. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. An interior lineman who has double-digit sacks for 2 or 3 years in a row, Pro Bowler, and maybe the Eagles make a push to bring him back because of what I just said. They kind of need interior defensive line. Or maybe they just say, let him walk, sign a huge deal, and we're going to get one heck of a comp pick out of it. Which, by the way, next year at this time, the Eagles comp pick situation is going to be about as glorious as it can be because a lot of these guys are going to sign big deals. So right now, that's kind of my mission in Indianapolis in 2 weeks is to figure out what this team is going to do with Javon Hargrave.
A couple quick more. Chauncey Gardner and Epps, those two safeties.
I would think Gardner is back. I mean, he's young. This is the type of guy that they want, a young guy. And also, for all that he came, the reputation that he came with in New Orleans for being a guy who talks a lot, gets under people's skin. So it was good. I mean, not only was he productive, but I don't see that he had any issues with any teammates, coaches, and, mix it up. I didn't see him getting any quarterbacks' faces after the whistle or anything like that. So, they paid Malcolm Jenkins, not just in free agency, but when that second contract that the Eagles gave Malcolm Jenkins was legit. And so I feel like they will prioritize they'll prioritize CJ.
Yeah. Sayamala?
Not so much. Epps might be someone who winds up leaving in free agency.
Sayamala?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were out in Adam and I were out in Arizona, and we heard from a pretty strong source that Sayamala was going to be a pretty targeted guy in free agency. That he was a high-ranking free agent on at least one team's board. I imagine. I just had a conversation with someone today that led me to believe he's probably a high-ranking free agent on a lot of teams' boards. The question is, do those teams that have him ranked high are they going to commit that kind of money to a guy who has a major injury history? And when I talk about this with people, they all say the same thing. They all agree that that's a big factor, but there's always going to be one team that says, screw it. We really need a guard like this, a good player.
Yeah.
And he'll probably get a really, really good contract.
I would imagine he does. I would also imagine Dillard gets paid. Not that that's a huge loss because they don't use him all that much, but I imagine he gets paid too.
You would imagine so. It's funny. It's the one guy we always sort of forget to talk about because he's not a starter and he's sort of an afterthought.
I'll tell you what, under the radar problem for this team, Gardner Minshew is also a free agent, and they love having that veteran or a very stable backup quarterback position. Gardner didn't make a lot of money, You now got to get another backup quarterback. I mean, they've paid Chase Daniels like $8 million to be a backup. I mean, with all these free agents, you can't also invest in backup. So you're going to have to go with a very unproven backup where Gardner was a very proven backup.
Right. So, like you asked me about, like, will they be risk averse because of, or not risk averse because of the Carson Wentz contract with Jalen? And I said, no, they will give Jalen his market. But I believe that they've learned. Well, I won't say learned. It's reaffirmed to them the way they got Jalen in the second round and then got Gardner for a sixth, that they will continue to look for deals at the backup quarterback to get good talent. And if it means signing Jalen Hurts to a really big contract and then, 6 weeks from now or whatever, whenever April rolls around in the draft, that they take another quarterback, second round, third round, high, whatever, I don't think that they'd be afraid to do it again. Even I think that they would feel like, maybe Carson couldn't handle it, but Jalen Hurts can handle it. And it doesn't matter because this is what we do. And it worked out for us. We believe in the value of a cost-efficient backup quarterback that we believe is a high-end backup quarterback, like we did with Jalen Hurts, like we did with Gardner Minshew. So I can't see Ian Book being the number 2 next year. I think that they will figure out a way to get themselves another cost-efficient number 2 quarterback.
All right, last one for Geoff Mosher. It's mock draft season. If I say the Eagles have the 10th pick, what position jumps out that they would be targeting at that spot?
Cornerback, offensive lineman, defensive lineman.
Offensive line, interesting. Okay.
I would not be surprised. Listen, again, if it all depends on how the board falls, but if there is a premier offensive tackle at that spot, they are not afraid to draft a replacement for someone. And we don't know with Lane Johnson how many years he has left or what his mindset is having gone through this injury. I mean, I think they expect him to play, but just don't know how long.
Yeah.
Mailata stayed healthy except for that early in the season. He had that, elbow or shoulder injury. But, if you're going to lose Dillard and Driscoll's not really a tackle, you need an offensive tackle. I mean, look, Juergens and Dickerson, great examples of guys that they picked and didn't know that those guys would play right away. Dickerson did have to, basically, by week 3. Juergens didn't play at all, but they believe in the value of drafting offensive linemen early. Don't wait for you to need it. Have it ready.
I saw a mock draft today that had pick 10 go D tackle and pick 31 go offensive tackle. So, yes, offensive line is a big possibility for the Eagles. And you might get that guy who just plays tackle, can play guard for a couple of years until Lane's done. So, something to keep an eye on. All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. What is the Inside the Birds off-season schedule?
All right, we are back to our twice-a-week per schedule now, Mondays and Fridays. I'm sorry, Mondays and Thursdays is when Inside the Birds will come out. We've got one final Q&A that'll be this week, and then they'll take a little bit of a break before they rejoin us again at some point with Quentin Michael and Jason Avant. We will have a series starting soon with Greg Cosell. We did it last year. It was called The Intel with Greg Cosell, where the first few weeks are dedicated to free agency, and then after that, about 5 or 6 more weeks, we do pre-draft and draft work. So we'll have that back with Greg Cosell, and we're working on some other new programming on the Inside the Birds network or Empire. And when we're ready to announce it, we will announce it with you.
It went from network to Empire. Look at that.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, Geoff Mosher. I told the story. Oh, you weren't there with us that night. I told the story about how the bar in Arizona didn't have any food. So I asked the bartender if we can get pizza delivered there. Some of the listeners thought that was just like amazing. I was like, yeah, we ordered so I said 6 pizzas. It was actually 5 pizzas, but then someone said 5 pizzas. How many people? They were like small, I'm not individual sizes, but they were like small pizzas, like a Tony's Baltimore Grill style, But I know.
Was it better than the pizza? Was it better than the pizza that we ordered the first night from that something Magic Ziggy Stardust pizza?
Yes, that's what I was like. I knew we were there one night. We ordered pizza. You and I and Grayson ordered pizza one night. We were like interested to be like, what's the pizza like down here? So we ordered this pizza like at 10 o'clock at night just to like get a Arizona like feel. But the pizza that we got was Palermo or Pomo. I don't know, but Adam Kaplan recommended it. So we got it delivered to the bar, which was called the Whining Pig.
Right. Now, how was that pizza in comparison to the one we had?
It was much better. Now, I had about 4 or 5 IPAs, so the pizza we had the first night probably would have tasted great.
I got you. Well, I can confirm for everybody that pizza the first night was god awful.
Not good. So. Not good. Geoff Mosher, he is good. Inside the Birds, they are good, and they're back with football at 4 tomorrow. Appreciate it, bud.
You got it, Mike.
All right, Moshe, all offseason, we got the football at 4 for you right here, only on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN.